All right. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here today. It's really nice to meet you all. Name Bernardo, as Paul mentioned. I'm from Spain, and I've been working with Cassandra for the past few years at this point. This is my kind of like first talk to an open source community here, so bear with me. I'll do my best. But yeah, we're here to talk about the CP42, which is about a constraints framework that the CP is proposing. I prepared some slides that I think are gonna help me to go through it. But yeah, this is basically me. Contact data. Feel like you can also reach me on Slack, so feel free to ping me for any like further questions or suggestions or anything else. Also, I'm based in Seattle, and if anyone's in Seattle and wants to like just grab a drink and talk about Cassandra, feel free to ping me as well. All right, so this is the agenda for what I want to talk about: the motivation, the goal of the CP, the approach that we're following, the proposed changes that we're doing or that I'm proposing for the code base basically, and then a little live demo, which is far from production or far from pull request ready, but at least I have something working that I can show around. And then of course, like questions and answers. All right, so why a constraints framework on Cassandra? The idea came from the fact that we have some customers that kind of abuse the database and just stores data blobs, large data blobs on rows, and that causes a bunch of issues and like on reading time and for operators and for the database stability and not being able to have those limits for those large data blobs has become an issue at some point for someone. So of course, we started to think like there must be a better way for this, and we started taking a look at what's existing on Cassandra. And currently, Cassandra has these guardrails that will allow you to set database-wide general limits for a column. Now that would help, or that could help, but then maybe that's not enough for like different other use cases, because these then again are general thresholds for the entire database, and they don't allow any granularity. So on this context, I added a patch, which is not merged yet. It has been reviewed and approved, but it's on hold pending on this CEP implementation, and see if we want to like go this way or just merge the path. But this patch here, and I can share the link later on. It's basically adding per column type sizes, so it's a little bit more granular than what we currently have in terms of what you would be able to add a specific limit for a block column or a specific limit for a text column instead of like a general limit for the entire database. So that's the current situation. Now, we wanted to go a little bit further, and that's the reason that we proposed the constraints framework on CP42. Basically, it aims to provide a generic enough framework for anyone, and by anyone I mean either operators or even users, configure constraints at a column level or at a table level, and not a column type specific level. I will show you more examples later on of what this means. But yeah, this would probably ease validations at application level, and I will also show some examples of how this can be useful. And we'll also protect the database from misconfigured clients. And by misconfigured clients, I mean, customers trying to store a 200 megabytes image in a row, which is something if you want to prevent that from happening. All right, so why is this beneficial? Like what comes with this? So basically, more information about your data model will give you more control over the decisions that you make. So Cassandra operators can tune in for performance a little bit better if they have more information of about like what's actually going to be on your rows. Same thing for maintenance overhead. That's a given from the previous one. Now, the way we want to do this is if we have this in place, extensibility for more complex validation is should be like straightforward, because like all the needed tools should already be in place, and it's just about implementing your own logic for more complex validations. And then, yeah, potential value in storage engine. This also comes to the previous points in which we are like with more information comes better understanding of your data and better like capabilities to tune in for like whatever you want. All right. So what's the goal of the CP? Is to provide a way of specifying and enforcing constraints at a column level and at a table level, and enforcing them at write time. And I will expand on the write time decision later on as well, because yeah, that also comes with some nuances. All right, which is the approach that we have followed for this? This is a basic example of what we are proposing. As you could, what are we seeing here? So the new thing that we are proposing is that if you see on the number of items column definition, we have this check keyword with a condition for that number of items to be valid. Now that's one type of constraints that we're proposing. The other one, and that would be the column type constraint, or the column level constraint, and we are also proposing a table level constraint, which is defined, as you can see here, after all the columns have been defined, and it starts with a constraint keyword, the constraint name, the check keyword, and then a function and the condition for that function. Now, this function is interesting because, as you can see on the numeric place, there's no function, and in the name constraint or in the table level constraint, there's a CQL function. Now, these are functions that can be added and expanded for those more complex constraints that I was mentioning before. And yeah, that's basically what we're proposing here. And I'll go in a little bit more detail about them. All right. Another thing that comes with like these definitions is that, and I will expand on possible or potential errors later on as well, but this was pretty interesting. For example, what happens if you try to define a function inside the condition of the constraint? What happens if you try to define a function with for a column type that is not suitable for that function? For example, this length is supposed to give you the length of a text-based column type. It doesn't make sense for an int or for a numeric type. So it just provides an error when you're trying to create a table. This is important for us to have valid constraints when we create tables with constraints. Now, what's the actual syntax? So as I mentioned before, we have two types of constraints. The first one being the column level constraint. That's just adding the check keyword after the column definition, and then the condition. The condition may or may not have parentheses. Now, for the second type of constraint, which is the table level constraint, we have the constraint keyword and a name for that constraint. That name will be used to reference it later in case we want to alter or drop it. And yeah, the check keyword and the actual condition. Here I'm like proposing, or I'm in this example is showing another type of extension that I will expand on later. If you see there, it's checking that two different columns comply with a condition. Right, moving forward. Now this is how we alter a constraint. It's basically just alter table, alter constraint, and then the name of the constraint, check with the new condition that we want to add, or just dropping it completely, also referencing it by the name. Now, what happens if that name, which is optional, is not provided? Then a random identifier is created for that particular constraint. You can reference it by the scribe table, and you will see the actual name that has been generated for it, and then you can alter or drop it. Now, as per the errors that we can have, the first error is the one that I was mentioning before, like the the parameters for the CQL function inside the condition of the constraint need to be valid or from a valid type. And then the second type of error that will happen at write time, and I will show you later on the actual demo, is what happens if the constraint is not met. So yeah, this is basically what's this error is describing. All right, what are the changes we are proposing? So first of all, we need to extend CQL, adding those 2 new keywords and just making sure that the grammar makes sense and works and doesn't break anything else. Now, at the time of the constraint creation, that is whenever we are creating a table or altering a table, adding a new constraint, we need to validate that the constraint and the functions and the types of the columns passed to that function are valid. And then the constraint execution, which is only validated at write time. Now, why just at write time? If we wanted to do this at read time, like it poses like several potential issues here. So what happens, for example, if we add a constraint by altering a table and there are some existing data or pre-existing data that is actually are already offending that constraint? If we enforce this at read level, that would mean that that data is not available anymore. You cannot read, you cannot access it. You will get an error because it's not satisfying the constraint. So what this means is basically that you can have data on your database that do not satisfy the constraint, but still have a constraint. What that constraint will do is like it will no longer allow you to write new data that breaks the constraint. I hope that made sense. All right, now as per what constraints are we gonna support? The CP proposes 2 core constraints, which are the top and most priority ones to be added, which are the length. This is the function that I was showing before on the examples. And what this does is that it gets a text or a text-based column and provides its length, basically. And that can be used to compare it against a threshold, a limit. And then the numeric type, which is basically, is this number equal, less than, more than, so on and so forth. That will be valid for numeric types. So these are the 2 that we are planning on implementing first. Now, another or a use case that can be like, this is what I was mentioning before, something that can be done with these types of constraints is like being smarter about creating data types. For example, in this case, these are 2 different examples of creating logical objects that do not exist in Cassandra. For example, this key space color, we're getting the 3 red, green, blue, and just making sure that all the numbers or all the values in the rows are valid within that range, the 0 to 255. That means that on the database you have an actual color object that is supposed to be valid. And it also shows that how these constraints can be combined. Now, how are we planning to extend this or like follow-up constraint types that should be or will be somehow supported by the framework? Is for date types. Paul, you raised a hand.
Oh, I just wanted to point out there's a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Some of them I think maybe were from a little earlier, but so let's see. I'm guessing this requires TCM to be done safely. I think that came from a little while ago, but let's see. Oh, can you see the chat, Bernardo?
Oh, wait, I
on the
can't because
bottom.
I'm.
Oh, sorry. Okay, here I can read it. Sorry if you want. But someone said earlier and maybe if you wanna, you can also unmute yourself if you wanna explain yourself the question. Who wrote that about. I'm guessing this requires TCM to be done safely.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry, it's Caleb. And I don't think it's an issue of of safety. I think it's just more there might be a few more transient client surprises depending on which coordinator you hit, I suppose, without TCM. But it's not like a wouldn't be like a data loss or safety issue.
Yeah, I also see the doc answer. Like there was a thread about that. And yeah, like this could be developed without TCM in place. But yeah, it would definitely, like, this is one of those things that will benefit from TCM. But it's not adding like new issues.
Yeah, it might be a little more interesting later with like a chord like recovery or something, but for now it's not. I don't think it'll matter.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and I did have a second question, which was whether we wanted to have concepts of like client warning versus failing mutations with this, or we're gonna just kind of stick with the simple like failure thresholds.
Yeah, I was saying that I think we're like, at least for initial proposal, we're gonna stick to the simple thresholds. You can always have guardrails for those warnings, but yeah, I mean, it could be extended to add warning and fails. It just, yeah, we should have, we would think about it, I guess, or we'll think about it. But yeah, it hasn't been added to the CEP or to the proposal. I think it's best to start simple and then just extending the framework as we go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a part of me that kind of agrees. A lot of the reasons people would want to do this, it's like, oh, I have a text column that's in a particular format, that's a particular length, and it just has to be that. And if someone puts something else in there, they shouldn't have, and like that's just always a
Mm.
failure. There's no like, hey, I'm warning you that
Yeah,
you put
exactly.
something
Because also,
completely
like,
invalid in this field.
having warnings here, how would you, like, would you return that as an error? Like, I don't know if the driver supports that concept of warnings for, I don't know, like, I
Yeah,
should like
they're client
see all of
warnings.
that for, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're client warnings, but yeah, I think just again, most of the things you'd want to do this for feel like they're more hard failure or like don't let that mutation in sort of thing.
Would it rise to being like an invalid syntax exception, or like, or would it be like a new kind of error? I'm just curious to know like how it would surface to the client, I guess.
I would say, like the way you mean, Andy, this warning threshold against a failure threshold. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, I see. So this is more of like you're close to the margin, but you're not on the margin, or is it you're
Yeah,
past
something like that.
Okay.
I think the direction of this is like, for example, in guardrails, we have this concept of warning thresholds and failure thresholds. So you do something over the warning, but below the failure, it would still go through, but you will get a warning. So I guess defining something like that on the constraints side is what was being suggested.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, for now it's only failure, and if we needed warnings, we can definitely extend this. All right, I'll be back to full screen. Yeah, so yeah, we were talking about the extension constraints, and I have a meeting chat open now, so I can see what's going on. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so for date types, for column types, which are dates, we can have before, after, or equal, although equal doesn't make much sense, but yeah, before and after. For text-based, for example, like validating that is JSON, this would probably be clashing with a potential JSON column type, which I don't think exists today in Cassandra, but this would be an alternative for that. Or complies with a given pattern is like something like a regex pattern that is given to the constraint. So any text that you add there needs to comply with that regex. Not null, that's also something that's could be useful. And then general table constraints, some things like comparing different columns. For example, that column A is like minor than column B, or the other way around, or same for dates. This is an extension that could also be like pretty useful. Now, as per the interface that we're proposing, it just needs two methods. One of them being validate, that's executed whenever a constraint is created. and that checks the types for the condition and that everything makes sense. And then the execute, which is executed at write time. And that's the one that tells you the condition on the constraint is being met or not. Yeah, I do agree. Like it should be able to expand non-awkwardly. So basically, yeah, taking just failure as default, and then if you want to add a warning, maybe just add a warning keyword. All right, and then what about guardrails? And that's something that was brought out in the discussion on the community discussion on the email thread. That was pretty interesting. What happens because we have threshold guardrails as well, as I mentioned in the motivation. What happens if those two are clashing? What happens if, like, what do we do there? So the way we saw this, or the way that was proposed on the CEP, is that the guardrails should take preference over the actual constraints. Why is that? Because the guardrails are set or tend to be set by operators, and they are like general please behave kind of rules set up by operators for all the users from the database to abide for. Now, that may or may not be true for the constraint framework, because anyone creating a schema can create some constraints. So basically, what happens if a guardrail and a constraint clashes? Let's say that you have a more restrictive guardrail than a specific constraint. Now, or if that wasn't the case, if the guardrails didn't take preference over the constraints, that would mean that that the customers can somehow overcome or just override those guardrails set by the operator, and that's not a good thing. Yeah, that's it from the presentation standpoint. Now, let me share my terminal. And yeah, of course, I'm expecting some demo effect. So if it fails, it's just a demo effect. You should be able to see it now.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, full disclosure here. This is very far away from production ready code. It's just like I've been implementing or toying with the implementation of this because I want to like post a patch pretty soon, and I'm almost there. And I have a lot of things working, but some other are broken, and there's a lot of exploratory code here and there. But at least it compiles, and I can show you like a couple of executions and how things would work. So basically, this is my trunk version with my branch. And if I do, right, I'm executing the Cassandra database. And here, okay. All right, hasn't started yet. You see demo effect. Oh, interesting. It was working literally 10 minutes ago. Well, 20 minutes ago. Huh.
This is the curse of the demo we talked about.
This is so funny. I guess I can kill all of this. I guess this is the way.
Would it publish in the log, right? Like
it is complaining of port 7199, I think, Bernardo. Oh.
Yeah. Yes,
There we go. Now it's working. Thanks, Rania. Right. Boom, now we're connected. All right, so let's create a simple case space. And of course, I have my commands from copy paste here, and create a DOM table with two constraints. So basically, if you take a look at this, it's just a CK1, which is a text-based column, and a CK2, which is an integer. Now I'm adding two constraints. one with a name, the other one without a name. The first one just has the length method, checking that it's smaller than 4, and the second one without the name method, so should be like the ID should be randomly generated with a numeric constraint that CK2 should be bigger than 100. And of course it doesn't work. Because table doesn't like it.
Yeah, it's a reserved word, I think.
Yeah.
So
There we go. And now, if I do this, as you can see here, it should work because, you know, foo is smaller than 4, and like the length of foo is smaller than 4, and the 200 is bigger than 100. So it works. Now let's add a brand new one, which should fail, right? Because this guy here is the length of this is bigger than 4. Boom, we get the error. And we try to do the same thing with a numeric value. It also fails. So yeah, that's the live demo. And that's all I got.
There's one more question here from Maxim about batch mode.
I guess that's a good question. I need to take a look at how those batches work. But yeah, eventually, whenever you're trying to do that, it should fail. I honestly don't know at which point inside the batch the right statement for a given from a given column is going to be executed, for a given row is going to be executed.
I think a batch creates a bunch of statement objects that are the same class as the regular single SQL statements. And it runs through some of that code, at least. It doesn't, I don't think it executes them one by one. I can't remember. But it uses them to...
Then the batch should fail, yeah.
Well, it uses them, I think, to generate the mutations, but then it probably delivers all the mutations together. I'd have to look at the code.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So whenever that happens,
assuming they're for the same partition, yeah, it'd be one mutation.
But it doesn't have to be. We support batches over multiple partitions.
Support, but don't encourage, I guess.
Oh, in fact, they can even be multiple tables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it fails, though, it should just be another way something in a batch can fail.
And I think Andy has a question too.
Oh yeah, I was just kind of curious about your thoughts on, you had some notes there about like text-based types and the kind of validation you could do. Like, I think it says length is JSON or compiles with a given pattern. I guess the first question is like, if we do like pattern-based matching, we probably need to be concerned about like, I guess like people doing malicious things with regexes, I guess. But that seems maybe it's not too big of a concern because the person who creates a schema has control over what pattern you're validating against. And then my next question was like, is there something like, maybe this is kind of passe with UDFs these days, but could we have like a UDF where you could say like, oh, you know, string must match something evaluating against this function, returning a predicate of true or something?
So
or will we not get that fancy?
Yeah, as for your first question, we definitely need to be careful in which constraint types we add to the framework. And that's the reason probably that I just mentioned these two core ones, because they are like useful and they are valid, and I think there's little concern about them. But then for others, like for example, this is JSON validation, like maybe what we want to do is just to add a JSON type to the column type, then this constraint doesn't make any sense, like doesn't make sense anymore. Or for that regex pattern, like there's, as you said, there's security concerns. There may also be like, hey, you know, regex pattern matching is expensive. Yeah. So please make sure that you have enough CPU for not to like burn yourself out and stuff like that. So and that will be true for like pretty much all of the other validation or all of the other constraint types. So what I'm expecting here is an actual discussion around every single one of those, because I do foresee like different approaches which are valid, and we should decide as a community what to do and what should go in and what shouldn't. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I was just kind of wondering if there's an opportunity to make this like pluggable somehow, where like you can like
It is pluggable, so you will have an interface, and as long as it's like, you know, the actual executor is there, you should be able to create easily a new validation or a new
Cool.
constraint. And your second question was, sorry, I just forgot it.
I think you answered both of them actually. The first one was
Nice.
about like the possible security vulnerability of validating expressions, and the second was like basically how extensible can it be. So I think you covered it both. Yeah.
Cool. Any more questions for Bernardo? Well, yeah, Bernardo, do you have anything else to say, or do you think we're good to go here?
I think we're good to go. It's been awesome. Thanks everyone for joining today.
Yeah, yeah, cool. And I think if people do have more questions, then I guess you just take this to the email list, right? To the users list.
Yeah, users list or Slack, or like I'll be around.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for your presentation. Like I said, we'll put this on the Apache Cassandra YouTube channel as well. So, and when I do that, I'll post that in the ComDev channel on the ASF Slack. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Bernardo, and yeah, catch you at the next one.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.